Fantasy Point Monsters. On this week's episode of the Fantasy Ruckers Show, we are wrapping up our 2023 fantasy player ranking reveal with the guys that were scoring the tries, looking good while doing it, and winning you weeks with the amount of points that they were scoring. The best back three players from the 2023 fantasy MLR season. We're also going to be talking about the Rugby World Cup and the exciting finale that was this past weekend, and of course, go over all the latest signings and trades from across the league. The Fantasy Rucker Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode number 84 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of trying to make fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. With you, as always, Matt Yee, Ryan Yee, and Matt. We had a busy weekend of rugby. The finale to the 2023 World Cup in France. Obviously, a shocking result at the end. Maybe not the match that you had predicted going into it, but we're going to break that all down. And of course, in this episode, we continue our top fantasy player ranking reveal. And we're wrapping it all up finally on this episode with the point scorers, the try machines, the back three players we're going to break down. And this one was an interesting one to get into, which is going to be fun to break down. But Maddie, how was your weekend of exciting rugby here, especially when it comes to World Cup?
It was good. It was exciting. Disappointing, unfortunately, but I had to rep the All Blacks jersey one last time before I put it away for a little bit. But yeah, it was an exciting weekend of rugby, that's for sure. We had, the premiership still going on, the final, the bronze medal match, and both were just unreal games to watch. So love a good weekend of rugby, love a good weekend of meaningful rugby. But now we just look forward to the MLR 2024 season, right?
Yeah, and the roster signings keep on coming in too. I mean, I feel like every single week there's just so many, especially compared to seasons past. It's just nuts. Trades, signings, re-signings. There's just a whole flurry of them, which we're going to get to here on this episode.
And the crazy part is the insiders of the MLR, the Major League Rugby League, continue to hint at more signings to come. And we saw last year that the signings are going to go right up until when we are trying to make draft decisions and putting together our draft boards. And frankly, a signing is going to come halfway through the season as well. That's going to be pretty big probably. So, it's been an exciting offseason for sure. I'm excited after all this, after the Rugby World Cup to kind of start preparing for this upcoming season and start really looking at, hey, what are the players we got to watch? Because we got to start doing some research, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll talk Rugby World Cup. We'll talk signings and trades and the latest news and notes from around the league. And, of course, get to that back three top fantasy player ranking reveal from the 2023 season. But first, as we say every single episode, if you aren't already, give us a follow at the Fantasy Ruckers. The handles are up above if you're watching on the YouTube channel. Down below in the description if you're listening on the pod. We are making moves here. We mentioned and sneak peeked on last episode that we have a revamped website in the works. One that should give us the ability to open up this fantasy MLR thing to more than just our league, to people across the Major League Rugby landscape. And I know that's been something that people have been waiting for quite some time. And we're hoping that for this 2024 season, we'll be able to open up. So you'll want to follow us at the Fantasy Ruckers, X, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube as well, to get the latest in the know when that does happen and any other details when it comes to fantasy MLR. And of course, you'll want to join our Discord channel as well. You can find that down below. Great community over there. And if that's all enough, not enough for you, we do have our existing website right now. If you want to get early in on that research that Maddie is talking about that people need to get to, you can start diving into the past season stat there on thefantasyruckers.com. But stay tuned. I think that website is going to be changing in the near future, which will be very, very interesting. So, all right, Matt, let's get into it. You said it, exciting weekend of rugby. We'll get into the final in just a second here, but I want to quickly touch on the the bronze medal match,
Yeah.
26-23 victory, England over Argentina. I mean, if there's a consolation prize for a Northern Hemisphere team to come into the World Cup and at least come away with some hardware, England, you got to give them props. Not what we expected going into the World Cup, I don't think, but they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I'll be honest, right? I forgot that there was a bronze medal match in this tournament, but yeah, no, it was an exciting game. I was rooting for Argentina, as everyone should, or any normal person should. Um, but yeah, England came out on top. It's kind of interesting storyline. You look at it, Argentina, a team that coming into the World Cup wasn't the Argentina that we've seen in the past few years, underperforms in the World Cup in the same pool as England. And you kind of didn't expect them to perform as well as they did in the knockout stages. And England kind of had that same thing, losing to Fiji heading into the World Cup, comes into the World Cup, plays unreal in the pool stages. And then they end up facing each other in the bronze medal match. So congrats to England. But yeah, the first kind of start of the exciting matches. Sad to see Argentina lose though.
Yeah, and then shifting over to the Saturday matchup, obviously New Zealand, South Africa, two Rugby World Cup
Yeah.
titans coming into this matchup. Both of them having won 3 World Cups in the past. One of them going to be coming out of this matchup with the only nation in history to have 4 Rugby World Cups. And it is South Africa who comes out on top in a tight, low-scoring match,
Yeah.
12 to 11. Opportunities there for New Zealand to take the lead late. I think the big conversation in this one is going to be the cards. Cards had a lot to do in this match. Early yellow card given to New Zealand. And then we had a red card given to Sam Cane, and then another yellow given to Khaleesi there on South Africa. But yeah, huge blow against New Zealand for Sam Cane to be given that red card. I guess let's start the conversation there. You agree with the call because there was conversations that Khaleesi's hit was somewhat close to what Sam Cane was doing, but did
Yeah.
not get the red card. It's a tough one.
Yeah, and the head contact laws are becoming safer, but more confusing every year. But what it came down to was the fact that Sam Kane had no mitigation in his tackle, meaning he
Hmm.
was standing straight up. Sia Khaleesi was trying to make a rugby tackle and bet hinging at the hips, and that's what kind of made it different. But the last comment on refing and refing decisions is, I think it was unfortunate how much of the TMO guy I saw. That's not a face that I need to see for 50% of the game. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I had to hear his voice and see his face way too often. It is what it is. That aside, I just think that one, you look at this match and to think that you were going to get one total try scored
No kidding.
out of these teams in a full 80 minutes, the cards, the rain, all feeds into it, but it was just insane. It's just an unexpected way to reach that type of result. But congrats to South Africa. I think they totally deserve it. And honestly, congrats to the All Blacks for the fact that they played 60 minutes with a man down and South Africa didn't score a try in that
Yeah.
whole 60 minutes. So
Yeah.
intense drama, everything you could ask for in a World Cup final. And we got it. And yeah, it's two historic sides, two familiar foes coming together and the clash of the Titans, as you said, Ryan. And that's kind of what we got and what we expected.
Yeah. So again, South Africa winning this one, 12 to 11. Again, the only nation in the history of the Rugby World Cup to now have 4 Webb Ellis trophies in their cabinet. We'll have to wait another 4 years' time now to figure out who will be able to rack up another one here. But yeah,
Yep.
an exciting wrap up to the 2023 Rugby World Cup in France. Lots of storylines. I think lots of exciting upsets. I obviously a lot of memorable ones. You have Fiji's performance and what everything they were able to do. It was a good World Cup and it was a nice end to it as well. So again, that's a nice little wrap up to an exciting weekend of rugby, an exciting couple months of international rugby. So. Any last words there on the 2023 Rugby World Cup, Maddie?
Nope, that's it. No more Rugby World Cup anymore. And now we shift over to the MLR.
Yeah.
It's what it is.
And just shift before we start talking news and notes here from across Major League Rugby. I just want to give a little bit update. Obviously, like we said, we love our fantasy sports here on the Fantasy Ruckers
Yeah.
Show. So we always take our time to dabble in other sports. Obviously, we play in a whole bunch of fantasy sports across North American sports, but we decided to give a little bit of a shot here to Fantasy Premiership Rugby Fantasy over on superbrew.com. A little bit of a step back from round two there, Maddie. We were in the
Well,
top, I believe, 30 percentile there, and we were pretty confident coming out of that. A little bit of a drop off here.
look,
Top 40 percentile now.
we can compare ourselves to the world all we want. We can compare ourselves to the country all we want. But at the end of the day, there's a few other guys in this league of ours, or in this group of ours that we're going against. Stephen Lone Rugby Morning, and I hate to say it, but whether I'm 33% in the world, I'm the top 1% in that league. So,
There you go.
that's all I have to say about that one.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one again. The way that Super Brew approaches it, more of your traditional European fantasy style, where you have a salary cap, you pick a lineup, not
Now,
like the draft style here that we have on
and
Fantasy Ruckers. But Matt, after kind of 3 weeks into it, and you kind of making these transfers here, kind of what's your
I
ideology, your
mean,
thought
you know
process?
how many times I've looked at the lineup and goes, "Oh, I can't drop this guy because I got to keep him. What if he goes off late in the season?" And then I remember the fact that I can always pick him back up,
Yeah, yeah,
and nobody else is going to take him from me. And I
yeah,
keep thinking in that mindset of, "Oh, I can't drop him. He might come back. I can't drop this guy. He might come back. He might play better later in the season." And I just can't get that mindset out of my head. I'm too used to the North American style, and I'm trying to work that out. But I don't want to lose it too much, right? Because I got to pull that back in once the draft comes around, right?
yeah. Absolutely. You got to make sure that you have the right mindset, because you'll have
Yeah,
to shift to that. The fantasy MLR season's not too far away, Maddie. Not too
it
far
is
away.
not.
Can't stray away too far with your strategies, especially as being the former champion. People are going to be hunting you, especially with the
It
moves
is
that we're
true.
making this year. All right, let's get into news and notes here from across Major League Rugby. Again, like we said at the top of the show, just a whole flurry of signings, and again, it just feels, and I don't know if this is recency bias, Maddie, but it just feels that there's just so much more movement and
Well,
activity this offseason. A lot of that can be because of the new teams with Miami, with this unnamed LA team. And just it just feels like there's just so much going on here. And we're in the heart of the offseason right now.
well, we've
Um,
been saying this the past 2 years, right? The
yeah,
past 2 years have been, whoa, well, we've never expected this many international signings, and this year again, we've never expected this many just signings in general. And I think it's a mix of both. It's the fact that yes, there guys actually want to come to play in the MLR. And then the other thing is the fact that teams are being more open with who they're signing and who they're re-signing, and
hmm
they're understanding that, hey, we got to get these players out there to our fans so that they know exactly who's going to be on the team that they're cheering for in the upcoming season. And we love to see it as fantasy guys. We love to see transparency. They're still working on it, obviously, but we're seeing some more transparency than we have in the past. That's for sure.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's get right into it. There's a lot that we got to get through, so no time for waste. We'll start with the Toronto Arrows here and the busy week that they've had. Again, they continue to follow their re-signing flurry
I
and
like this
expect
week's
that.
better though, Rye. This
Okay.
week's better.
All right. All right. That's good. That's a step up. That's a step up.
Yeah.
We got back row re-signing of James O'Neill. Noel Reed is re-signing with the Toronto Arrows as well, and also the return of Peter Nelson. So three pretty marquee guys. Club Man of the Year of 2022, James O'Neill, returning. Noel Reed, Irish rugby center. He has that international experience. He did miss parts of 2023 with
Yeah.
injury. But he did earn 7 MLR caps and a try during his first season in the MLR. And then you talk about Peter Nelson, 8 caps in 2023, 7 starts. Was
Yeah.
kind of that kind of step up guy when Sam Malcolm obviously was in the case. He kind of had part time in that role a little bit to be in there. But yeah, I mean, three guys, not from a fantasy perspective, weren't really impactful, but I think staple
Well,
guys with this Toronto Arrows team.
I think Noel Reed had when he was playing, he had the ability to have some fantasy impact, and he was definitely at the start of the season a guy that people were keying in. I know he had, I think, one decent game. but not up to the par of some of the top centers that we see in the
Mhm.
league for sure. And that's, we've seen that center is very reliant on the performance of the team, and the Toronto Arrows, frankly, in light terms, sucked and were garbage. So, but I want to look at this at a holistic approach now. Like, think about this back line now. I'm just thinking we've got Robbie Povey at 10.
Yep.
We got Noel Reed at 12. Let's say Fabian Goodall comes back. Let's say, oh man, my favorite name in the world. We'll get there. I forget the other center. He has the craziest name.
Tuli Tasi.
Yes, Tuala Tasi. The Tasi man. Him as well. We got Rewida Biddle. We got Tarangatira Waitokia. We got Peter Nelson. We got Sam Malcolm. I mean, you look at that backline and you look at last year's backline, that is two completely different. And you got Mitch Richardson as well. I mean, that's two completely different backlines from last year. It's no longer just a backline full of young Canadian prospects or older Canadian prospects.
Yeah.
It is now a backline that has guys who have seriously proven themselves in the MLR. And we should be looking at that backline as something special, because I think that's a mix of guys that could do something special in this league. We'll just have to see how it goes. But I know I've been bashing on them for signing a lot of Canadian talent and doing the same old. But when you look at the backline holistically and you look at the signings they've made, it looks impressive. It definitely looks different. And it looks like those young Canadian guys now have guys that they can actually learn from rather than just being thrown into the fire.
Well, I think that's the approach, right? Like, I think with the Toronto Arrows, I respect, right? I respect their emphasis on developing homegrown talent, right? But I think this is the way that they need to do it in terms of having your base building blocks of guys that can be competitive. Tarangatira Waitokia, Rewida Biddle, Robbie Povey. Have those guys in your lineup that are kind of those base guys that can be competitive, and surround them, whether it's depth talent or guys that you can kind of piece into the starting lineup with those kind of homegrown guys. I think that's the way that this Arrows team needs to approach it to stay competitive and not be like the way they have been, especially last season. Again, they were also plagued by injury last season as well, but all those things clashing together led to what was a pretty disappointing 2023 for them. But nonetheless, I am as well excited for this back line that is going to be coming through here, and that's without the mention of I believe like Sam Malcolm is still with the team, correct?
Yeah. Sam Malcolm re-signed, but like when I think about it, this is probably going to be the 15, or the back line is going to be, factoring in the fact that they need to have some Canadian guys in the back line. It's going to be probably Robbie Povey, Noel Reed, Rewida Biddle, Tarangatira Waitokia, Peter Nelson or Sam Malcolm at 15. And then maybe you have Mitch Richardson on the wing. I mean, it's going to be interesting for
sure. They
got
options.
Right. You got Tuala Tasi coming off the bench. You got Fabian Goodall coming off the bench. Those guys are utility backs. And it'll be interesting to see. And I definitely think that when you look at it, they've made a big step up in their back line this year for sure.
All right. And the guy that is going to be the new guy, the new face that will be putting together the lineup. The Toronto Arrows announced the appointment of former Bath Rugby head coach and assistant coach for Stade Francais Paris. Stephen Meehan is joining the club and will be leading this Toronto Arrows side moving forward 2024 and beyond. This is a good step. I mean, now they have their guy. Obviously, there was the disappointment that they faced last season. We'll see what Stephen Meehan is able to put together and with the new weapons that he has. I mean, I would be excited if I was in Coach Meehan's shoes here with the weapons that you potentially have for the 2024
year.
For
sure. I think he's definitely got the caliber and the kind of the resume that speaks for itself. And he's definitely got, I think, a little bit more of a more impressive resume than Peter Smith had when he was coming in.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting. The other thing that kind of interests me is the fact that, this is announced after Corey Hector is being announced as moving up. So I wonder if Stephen Meehan is kind of chose Corey Hector as being one of the assistant coaches on the team. It'll be interesting to see, but I'm excited. These new faces, the new coaching, new culture, obviously hoping to see a change and a turnaround in that Toronto Arrows to be back to the Arrows of old, who were one of the original MLR success.
Absolutely. All right, let's shift on over now to the NOLA Gold. Cam Dolan is re-signing with the NOLA Gold team captain, and he's returning again. This is the transparency, Matt, that you've been excited about. He will be
Yeah.
returning for the next 2 years. He has
Oof.
signed through 2024 and 2025. 67 caps, 64 starts over that time, 61 with the Gold, and captaining 36 of them and scoring 14 tries over that span. Those stats thanks to James Dealey, MLR stats at Jam Delay on X. Cam Nolan, interesting. I want to talk to him mainly as a fantasy asset because he's been an interesting one. There were years where Cam Nolan was so explosive and just such a threat, especially with his meter gains ability. Kind of the way I put it was a poor man's Reichert Hatting. And
Uh,
and 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 Cam Nolan had
More
these
like a
years that he was
clean
able to
record
do it.
hatting.
There, fair enough. But this past season was kind of disappointing. I mean, I maybe that goes to kind of how Nola Gold kind of performed. He had certain games. Part of it, I think, is his shift to more of the second row position, which is why he maybe not have been explosive. He was playing a little bit more back row in previous years with the Nola Gold, if I remember correctly. But I mean, he had adequate games, 9.5, hovering around the high single digits there. Finished the year with 92.8 fantasy points in the 13 of 14 games that he started this past season, this past fantasy season. Um, Adequate at the second row position, a guy that you were okay with plugging in your lineup, maybe not necessarily over the moon in terms of the upside he was going to bring you each week.
Yeah, I mean he's a second row 7, right? Like a second row 7 in an 8-man league is going to be on a team, right? Like there is no league where Cam Dolan won't be on a roster
Mhm.
being a second row 7, right? Um I think you're just not expecting a lot from him. You're just expecting points.
Yeah.
You know he's not going to goose egg you. You know he's going to be out there. You know he's going to get minutes because he's the captain. But yeah, to your point, Rye, like you kind of lose some of that explosiveness with the move to second row. We really don't see as many points out of that second row position. Um, and yeah, I mean, we hope to see maybe a continuance on the improvement in the next 2 years in the MLR, and continuing to kind of be fantasy relevant and continuing going from second row 7 to maybe second row being in our top 5, right?
Yeah, not too shabby. I mean, you got
And
to remember that too, right? Like, I mean,
yeah,
that's something when you see the 92.8 points, you're like, that's not that great, But then again, I think as we were going through these fantasy player ranking reveals, you have to remember that each position kind of lends itself to
yeah,
that kind of that range of points that they score. And again, yeah, 92.8 was
and
enough, like you said, to get him as the seventh best second rower this past year.
And that's the same number of points as Colin Gross, a guy that we were kind of noting throughout the year as a
Hmm.
guy that you kind of had to have on your roster.
Sure.
And Cam Dolan just seems like we didn't talk about him much, and he just kind of went under the radar all year, just slowly racking up points through minutes, through just being consistent in his play. And those are some of the guys that you need on your roster, and it's good to see him back in the MLR for the next 2 years. Before we move on, right, to another team, Nola Gold, I guess Rays Rugby also announced the fact that they're expecting a new head coach, or
I
a
did see
head
that.
coach announcement. And Kane Thompson isn't leaving. He's just staying within the program potentially as an assistant. So who knows? Maybe expect to see that in this coming week. Probably due to their poor performance last year. So I kind of expect that. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that kind of changes up their culture and changes up what they're doing over there in NOLA.
All right, shifting over to the Utah Warriors now. A few signings, and I think the more bigger news here is the departure that the Utah Warriors has had. But the signings first: Angus McClellan returning, the most capped player in Warriors history, is returning to 2024. We also have the signing of Michael Manson from Rugby South in New Zealand, played in the Bunnies Cup. This is kind of a guy that kind of highlights what you were talking about, Matt, about getting showcased in the NPC Bunnings and then being able to kind of move over here and get some experience. And then
Yeah.
also the re-signing of Saya Uhila as well, kind of a marquee name there for the Utah Warriors, third most capped player ever for the franchise. Again, those three guys, it'll be interesting. I want to know your opinion on what Michael Manson will bring. But again, Angus McCullough, not really fantasy
Yeah.
relevant. Saya Uhila, not really fantasy relevant there either. Just kind of depth Utah
Yeah.
Warriors
I
pieces
mean,
that are, a part of the squad, but not guys that were necessarily on rosters.
Uhila was almost like a stream if you had to last
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
He never really did any. He didn't get over double digit points all year. So yeah, definitely not too fantasy relevant, but we'll see. He'll definitely be there in that streaming conversation when he gets starts, but he mainly came off the bench last year. Um, and then Angus McClellan, for me, not fantasy relevant, but when you think of the Utah Warriors, it's hard not to think of Angus McClellan, just the fact that he's played so many games for them
Mhm.
and he's just been the kind of staple of that front row. Um, but yeah, to this Michael Manson kid, young guy. So the big kind of stat or fun fact for him is the fact that he was a ranked national sprinter in New Zealand, like 100-meter sprinter, which means, are we going to see this guy just absolutely burning the jets on on some guys in the MLR? So it'll be interesting to see there. I mean, we could see him as quite an explosive player. He obviously has the skill and the talent coming out of Southland. Um, but
Do you think he could run back and forth, run to both side 200 meters before you can finish one 100-meter sprint there?
he can
Nah.
run back and forth before I get to the 50-yard line. Before I get to half,
Yeah.
he'll be done.
Yeah.
So yeah, way faster than me, right? Way faster, but that's not a bar to beat.
You're-
You know that you shouldn't be impressed with beating that bar because I have not run over 10 meters in 3 years.
No kidding. No
So
kidding.
yeah, I'll be interested. I'm interested. I'm gonna go watch some Southland rugby. I'm gonna see what this kid's all about, and try to see whether that speed is gonna translate to the MLR because we've seen it, Ryan. Explosive guys on the wing, guys who can break tackles and run fast. We saw that with Deshaun Bowen. Those guys can go off for
That's
big
true.
points,
That's
and
true.
who knows what type of impact he could have, especially on that Utah Warriors explosive backline. So we'll have to see.
All right, and then shifting on to the big news here, the departure of Lance Williams. He will
Ugh,
not be returning to the Warriors for 2024. He's Utah's second most capped player, 72 caps, 68 starts since 2018, 18 tries there for Lance Williams. And this is a guy, no question. We talked about
no
fantasy
question.
relevancy, 134.7 fantasy points on the year from that back row position. Wasn't one of our top back row players
Well, he was
necessarily.
almost there.
But I mean, he was there in the top seven again. Finished as the back row 7 on the year. Not really that many explosive games. He had a big one in round 9 with 20 fantasy points, round 10, 17.9. But Lance Williams was always an exciting player to watch, especially on the Utah Warriors. And when he was able to produce for you, he produced for you, and he was fun to watch. And looks like he will not be returning to Utah for this next season.
Yeah, I mean, he was the explosive. He was the epitome of a guy who could go off any game,
Hmm.
right? Like not just last year, but the year before that as well. He was just a guy that we looked at as somebody who he could go off, and he was that type of athlete and that type of player. I'm sure Vandy somewhere in this world sitting in a corner and crying because he's leaving. I would be too if I was a fake Utah Warrior fan, but yeah. So good luck to him. It'll be interesting to see where he goes. I'm pretty sure he's U.S. Eagle eligible still. So I'll be curious to see if, we've seen this in the past where they say, oh, good luck on your next chapter. And next thing you know, he's just moving to another team.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right.
No
So,
kidding.
so we'll see if it's that or if he's actually going somewhere else to play. I don't know where that could be, but yeah, we'll have to find out. And I guess we're in the waiting game.
Yes, we'll see. All right, and then Utah Warriors involved in a trade here with the New England Free Jacks. They trade on over their first-round pick for 2024 and salary cap considerations for 2024 as well to acquire New England Free Jacks is Spencer Jones. And Spencer Jones was an interesting player because we saw him
Yeah.
start in certain matches, and when he started, he was fantasy
I
adequate.
love this for him. Right?
12.4 fantasy points in the first week that he started. I believe that was with the injury. He was in that replacement with LaRue Milan,
Yeah.
not starting earlier in the year. Has the ability to go to the back 3 position as well. Scored points there. This should be interesting for Spencer Jones.
Yeah, I love this for Utah Warriors, and I love this for Spencer Jones's fantasy value. I mean, the one thing with the New England Free Jacks is that center room is packed, right? Like unfortunately, he's just not gonna be beating out Ben Lesage and LaRue Milan because they were just too good together in that center pairing. And he comes to a Utah Warriors that's actually having a gap at that 12 position, right? Like Yes, they've got Lasike. We think he's still there. Yes, they got Tyler Fisher. Yes, they got Will Leonard, I believe, if my memory serves me right. But Spencer Jones, I think, is a very nice addition in that 12 or 13 spot. It'll be great to see his fantasy value go up, and hopefully he can get some consistent starts with this Utah Warrior team. And hey, Utah gave up, a first round pick for him, which means maybe that means something somewhere. I'm
It
not
is
sure
true.
what it's
I
valued
mean,
at, but like they
I mean,
gave
that's
something and they threw in some cash. They like threw a briefcase of cash at him too. So it means something to based on other trades. That seems like that's holds some value. Um, Although we did see people spending their first round pick last year like it was nothing.
true.
But
True.
2024, maybe different draft class.
Yeah.
Maybe this. I think to me they've given a lot of value for this guy. I can see him being a crucial part of this offense and be heavily involved and seeing his fantasy value go back to where it was probably the year before when he was with the Arrows.
Yeah. All right. Moving on over to the partners in that trade, the New England Free Jacks. They make a flurry of signings here. I don't think we need to touch too much on it. This is just kind of a wait and see approach to see where they're going to kind of fit in. Again, this is your former MLR champions. They're adding depth here. They're adding young players. Yeah. Junior Goffa, Gabe Casey, two players that they drafted. They have signed them. Killian Coughlin, U.S. eligible, went undrafted, signs with the Free Jacks as well. And then two kind of other players. Piers von Dadelsen is joining from Oxford University to the New England Free Jacks, and Cameron Nordley Kelamed, a Fiji-born Canadian eligible England rugby U18 scrum half. Holy crap, that resume is also going to the New England Free Jacks.
Yeah, so New England Free Jacks continue to have the reputation of essentially being the Canadians of the South, like the south of the border. I have no idea what's happening.
It's funny.
I have no idea what's going on.
It's funny because it looks like that the Free Jacks are doing better at what the Toronto Arrows are trying to do.
They have more of the marquee Canadians than the Canadian team has. Yeah. I don't understand. But hey, look, I think at the end of the day, it's great for Canadian rugby. The fact that a team like the New England Free Jacks are picking up these guys. I believe Piers von, I forget his last name. What was it, right? Piers von
Didelsen.
Yeah, nailed it. I think he's going to Spain with the squad. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what type of playing time these guys get and how these guys fit into that New England Free Jacks roster. But it's crazy that they're like taking that Canadian team south of the border and just grabbing onto it and never letting go.
And all right, switching over to San Diego now. This one's an interesting one because we've seen this name before, and he was fantasy relevant at times. Ryan James has signed with the San Diego Legion. The name sounds familiar because he played for the LA Guiltinis back in I believe 2022. Won a championship with them when they won that the Shield. Earned 25 of his 26 MLR caps. 12 of them starts with the Guiltinis at the time, scoring 6 tries. He's an athlete. Plays on the wing, can play fullback. He spent 2023 with the American Raptors in the Super Rugby Americas. It'll be interesting. Again, the San Diego Legion's back three kind of room is logjam. They have explosive players there, and now they're just adding another guy that could definitely be added to the mix. It's going to be interesting to see how James kind of slots into the fold there.
Actually, yes, Ryan James, great signing, but I think this more tells me that like MLR beat the Solar. The Glendale Raptors have been losing guys to the MLR this offseason. I think this is the third Glendale Raptor that has come over. So it's clear that they saw like, hey, I don't want to be losing in this Solar all this time. I'm going to go try and get on a winning team in the MLR. And Ryan James obviously did that. So yeah, interesting to see there. This kind of also got me thinking of, old LA Guiltinis. Do you think we'll ever see the old Ryberg back in the league?
John Ryberg, yeah, man.
Yeah.
The quadricep with eyeballs.
That old, like,
that name,
bulldozer.
That name has a special place on this podcast. The quadricep with eyeballs.
Yeah,
I miss him.
That old trash can that they call a bulldozer. Jeez, that guy sucked on defense.
A couple other San Diego stuff, Matt.
Yeah, so the other thing that I saw was that Ben Grant a staple of the San Diego Legion's second row, signed with the Hurricanes, my boys. So good for the Hurricanes. Unfortunate for the San Diego Legion. Although Brian Ray was hinting at that he would be being replaced by quote unquote another big fella. So we'll see what that means.
If that's all it takes to be an insider, if all I have to say is that he's gonna.
Well, hey, he knows there's a big fella coming. That's more than we did, right?
That's true. It's true. It's true.
But yeah, I'll be interested to see. It seems like, and we'll see as we talk more of some of these rumors, that it seems like the big signings, there's still more to come, right?
Yeah.
There's still more to come, and we thought that, hey, it seems like we're just at the start of it,
which is exciting. Okay, let's shift on over to Old Glory DC as we trudge our way through here to these signings. Again, we're going to be going over the top back three players here in just a moment's time after we get through a few more teams here. Talk about Old Glory DC. I think the first one I want to get out of the way, Old Glory DC announced the signing of Ethan McVeigh. He appeared in 9 games for the San Diego Legion a few years back in 2021. He played for the American Raptors, another one of these transfers from Super Rugby Americas. He's coming over to Old Glory DC. But the one that I want to touch on is a big one here. Graydon Bowd is re-signing with Old Glory DC. This is a guy that I think at the start of the season, there wasn't as much kind of hype around Graydon Bowd and what he could do, but he slowly overtook that fly half role in Old Glory DC. Obviously, there was a lot of expectation with Tito Diaz-Bonilla in Old Glory DC. Just wasn't, for some reason, just wasn't fitting kind of in Old Glory DC's game plan, wasn't playing to their standard. And Graydon Bowd, when they slotted it in him, that's when the winning really started to happen for this Old Glory DC side. Definitely a guy that will be looked at here in fantasy circles moving forward here.
Yeah, and I don't remember if it's been confirmed or not yet, but it seems like Tito Diaz-Bonilla is going to be out the door this year, because that's their second fly half signing of the offseason.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, great to see Graydon Bowd return. It'll be interesting to see whether he can win that starting job again. And if he does, he'll definitely be a guy that will be on fantasy managers' teams. And yeah, definitely we saw him kind of come to light and own that starting role and be a guy that you'd want on your squad at the end of the season.
Yeah, 68.5 fantasy points in the 8 matches he started. A season high 11.8 fantasy points in round 9 when he scored a try assist and added 2 conversion kicks on well with a 64 meters gain. So Graydon Bowd, kind of your lower tier fly halves, not a guy that you're necessarily counting on to be at your top point scorer, but he will be a guy that if you decide to go elsewhere for your explosive points, Graydon Bowd is an adequate fly half to have in that spot. And then now let's shift on over to the Chicago Hounds. These ones we kind of roll through here. A bunch of international signings. George Merrick is signing with the Chicago Hounds. England U20 lock, 6'7", huge guy. Harlequins pedigree there should be interesting for him. We got a signing from the Dallas Jackals. Brock Gallagher is joining the Dallas Jackals there. He has a lot of sevens experience, so it should be interesting there.
I've played with him. Congrats, Brock. We'll see how you do.
Okay. We'll see how he does. And then the 2 big ones I want to get to here to wrap up the news and notes here. I think we'll start on a positive one here. JP Smith is returning for the 2024-2025 season. Again, more clarity there with the Seattle Seawolves. JP Smith, the best scrum half, fantasy scrum half from the 2023 season, 108 fantasy points. It's looked like he's going to be running it back with the Wolves, and he's going to be one of the top guys off the board when it comes to the scrum half position for fantasy MLR, no question.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, JP Smith is the man, one of the top, like you said, top 9s in the league, and he will continue to be fantasy relevant as long as he is at that level of play. So yeah, great to see him back. Great for the MLR, great for the Seattle Seawolves, and even better for fantasy rugby.
And then last piece of news and note here with the Houston SaberCats. Captain Dean Muir is departing the SaberCats. This one is I think for some managers, a tough pill to swallow because there was so much hype for Dean Muir heading into the 2023 year. He was
Yeah.
drafted in our fantasy draft, eighth
First round.
overall,
Yeah.
first round, eighth overall, with just the high expectation of his usage in their set piece and the try scoring ability that he has. I believe he was dealing with some personal stuff. I believe this past season that resulted in him not being able to appear on the field as much as he could have, and never kind of reached that you know hype that he was really getting to. But when he got on the field, round 6, I mean, he was adequate. 12 fantasy points in his first start. There was a little bit of excitement there, but nonetheless, Dean Muir is leaving the SaberCats.
Yeah, sad to see. Staple of that Houston SaberCats forward pack for sure. But yeah, good luck to him in the future and everything. But definitely a hit on the MLR and hit on the Houston SaberCats. And the opposite of JP Smith, definitely a hit on fantasy MLR.
All right. Well, let's now shift on to what
Well,
all of our listeners.
Before,
Oh, you got
Ryan,
a couple more. Yes.
Before we got that, just last thing, I want to say one thing. One, looks like Rugby New York is teasing. We've seen them. We've talked about how quiet they've been this offseason. It seems like them themselves are teasing, announcing their 2024 MLR signings. So hopefully, I mean, I think they're going to come out swinging here after the season they had last year. So, I mean, expect some big signings here. The other thing I just want to point out to the viewers watching in the fantasy MLR or just the MLR fans is that we're getting into that time of year. NPC Bunnings Cup is over. We are moving into this time where guys are making decisions from the NPC Bunnings Cup and are understanding where they sit with some of these Super Rugby teams. So start to see a little bit more trickle of these NPC Bunnings Cup guys coming into the MLR. This is the time to do it from here, I think, until like January. This is when it's going to happen. So yeah, definitely expect to see some signings from New Zealand for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, now let's shift on over to wrap up our
Let's
top
see us suck
fantasy
again, right?
player ranking reveal from the 2023 year, and we end our couple months of ranking reveals with the back 3 position.
Ryan,
This one's a fun position.
Right? Not for us. Not this time, right? Not here.
Okay, the predictions were a little bit tough, and we're gonna get that. We got to man up here. We
didn't get one. Okay, sorry. I won't tease it.
We'll get there. But it was an interesting one, though, to say the least. Breaking down the top 5. What I got out of this before we kind of put it up on the video here, with some of these top guys, you know how the sentiment here on the Fantasy Ruckers show has always been that the back 3 is the volatile position.
Mm-hmm.
With some of these top guys, that might not be the case, because some of these guys were doing this past year was absolutely incredible. So let's throw it on the board, and let's throw it on the video here on your screen here on these top 5 guys and start breaking down what I mean. You can see it there now in the YouTube video, but I'll explain it for our podcast listeners. The top 5 back 3 players from the 2023 year from a fantasy perspective. Number 1, Joe Mono with 246.7 fantasy points. Number 2, Nate Augsburger of the San Diego Legion, 228.7 fantasy points, has a special place in Matt's heart, that's for sure. Liana Futi, 207.1 fantasy points from the Seattle Seawolves. Caleb McEnany of the Utah Warriors, 194.3 fantasy points. And then Paula Balakena, 193.3 fantasy points on the New England Free Jacks, coming in at that 5 spot. But yeah, like I was saying, these guys were consistently good all season long, and they kind of explained to me that if you can get one of these top tier back 3 guys, that might be the way to go. And I know that some guys went that route, especially based on some of the rankings that the predictions we had, and we'll get into that in this past draft. But I don't know, the sentiment here might be to continue going with some of these players, because man, what some of these guys were able to do was absolutely incredible. So let's start breaking it down, Matt. Let's start here with Joe Mono and talk about the season he had. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Like I said, 246.7 fantasy points with Utah. Scored, I believe, the most tries on the season. 14 tries with over 1,400 meters gained. Was able to do it on the defensive end as well with 82 tackles. Distributed well, too, with 5 try assists. Was available 14 of 14 games, Matt, he had an average of 17.6 fantasy points per match. incredible. If you could rely on him to get on average 17.6, this is not even the highs. This is obviously not the lows, but 17.6 on a consistent basis, incredible. And this is also a guy that he had those explosive matchups. Obviously, a lot of people are going to remember the crazy game that he had back in round 6, where he scored up 35.6 fantasy points with nearly 200 meters gained with
Yeah.
3 tries. But look at the finish of the season he had too. I mean, weeks 13, 14, 15, and 16, over 20 fantasy points. Joe Mono was an absolute beast this past year.
Yeah, you want to know the week that this is what sums him up. Week 7, 16.8 fantasy points. Played 32 minutes and got a concussion.
Yeah. No kidding.
16.8 fantasy. If I could get that, I won't care how many minutes he played. He could play 10 minutes and get that many points. And, he's a guy that you can even look at come off the bench and be like, yeah, he has a chance to come off the bench and still score over, double-digit fantasy points. That is ridiculous. He was ridiculous all season. It was a Utah backline that we did not expect to be as explosive as they were coming into it, but we quickly saw just how good they were and what type of offense that they were bringing. And Joe Mono was clearly a big part of that offense. And when you look at all these, like the top 5 and a lot of these back 5 positions, we're seeing a lot of Utah Warriors.
It's true.
Those guys knew how to put up points, and Joe Mono was a guy that put up the most, and it was crazy to watch, and was completely unexpected, especially with the way that he went in the draft. I think either undrafted or went super late.
He drafted the first pick of the 9th round.
Yeah, like that's not first pick of the 9th round performance.
No.
That is
he's the steal of the year.
For sure. And he's going
he's
to be up there at the top of the draft next year. And unfortunately, with the trend that back threes are going, probably will disappoint you.
Do you think he gets drafted in the top 5 in 2024?
I mean, Ed Fido went 1, right? So,
right.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be in the top 5 for sure. He has to be. He has to be. I don't even.
There's no question he's in the first round.
The way that it went last year with Ed Fido going as early as he did is that he's going to go in the top 5. Now the other question is, like, we saw what happened with Ed Fido, and once we get through this top 5, I want to make a comment about the back threes and like what we've seen versus the previous years. Is like, we saw what happened to Ed Fido. We saw what happened to some of these other guys that were in the top 5 the previous years. Is that going to make fantasy managers double think about when they're drafting back threes?
Yeah.
Because you can get a guy in the 9th round who could potentially go off. You're just taking a risk.
It's true. Just to put some things into perspective, more than a third of Joe Mono's matches that he started in were over 20 fantasy points. He only scored less than double-digit fantasy points in 3 of the matches that he played in.
That's dumb.
And those 3 matches, when I say single digits, it was like 9.8. So it should have been double digits. Joe Mono was ridiculous. Yeah, I predict that he's probably going to be selected in the top 5 next year. He was crazy. All right, coming in at number 2, Nate Oxberger of the San Diego Legion. I love bringing this guy's name up because, Matt,
I picked him.
Yes, you did pick him.
No, not just in the draft, in my top 5.
You did, but in a different position, I believe.
Should count.
So, 228.7 fantasy points on the season. For those of you who are not aware, who are just tuning in, the funny kind of story when it comes to Nate Oxberger is he was a key cog in Matthew's championship fantasy season this
He's
past
the best
year.
9 I had.
Yeah, he was obviously played scrum half in the 2022 season. So the expectation was that he was going to play scrum half in the 2023 year. And lo and behold, Matthew scrambles because Vandy steals the scrum half that he was wanting in Luke Campbell, the Nola Gold. He just says, you know what, screw it, I'm going to pick Nate Oxberger. And with this kind of off the wall, off the cuff type pick, he ends up getting the second best back 3 player in the entire league, the second best fantasy player in all of fantasy MLR. Absolutely nuts. Nate Oxberger was electric. I mean, played on explosive San Diego Legion offense, 9 tries, 1,300 meters gained. Did it on the defensive end exponentially well. 98 tackles for a back 3 player is pretty incredible. Distributed well, 7 try assists. We talk about Joe Mono's 17.6 points that he averaged per match. I mean, Nate Oxberger wasn't too far behind with 16.2 points per match. Nate Oxberger, when you watched him play, like he was he was electric. Like he had a next level ability.
Yeah, and he was just his footwork and his ability to break the gain line and break tackles was insane. I'll say something that underrated that I noticed was probably the best thing about owning him as a fantasy manager is when San Diego Legion announced a lineup that had no backup nine on the bench because you knew that Nate Oxberger was going to play 80. You knew that when Richard Judd went off last year, Nate Oxberger was going to go to the 9 position and continue to rack up points, get the 80-minute points, potentially get some tackles, potentially get some more meters gained. That was the underrated thing about him. And it wouldn't impact his eligibility because he would never start at 9.
Right.
So he was just the utility player for the Legion. He was insane to watch, just the way that every time he touched the ball, you thought, oh, this might be a try. And then add that in the fact that San Diego Legion's offense was the way that it was. It was crazy to watch.
I mean, how fun was that first 9 weeks? I mean, 19.3 in round 1, 18.5 in round 2, 15.3 in round 3.
Yeah.
By 12.3 in 5, 27.6 in round 7, 21.3 in round 8, 24.6 in round 9. I mean, that's
hey,
incredible.
It was even better the first 3 weeks. I had him in my 9 position.
I was just gonna say, and he also falls in there. I mean, he only had 3 matches where he scored below double digits, and again, 2 of those were hovering around the double-digit mark, anyways, 8.6 and 9.4. I mean, the only dud he had was maybe the difference between him and Joe Mono was that he had a 5.7 point dud. He played in one less or started in one less match than Joe Mono did in that 8.6 match, and he didn't really have that crazy 35-point performance that Joe Mono had, but nonetheless, Nate Osberger had the expectation. You're going in with the scrum half, could only be more happy. Not only did you get an adequate back three, you got one of the best back three and one of the best players in all of fantasy sports as well.
Right.
Coming in at number 3, Liana Futi. Seattle Seawolves back 3 player comes in at that 3rd spot, 207.1 fantasy points. This was a guy that kind of epitomized just explosive games because he maybe was not as necessarily consistent as I'd say Joe Mono or Nate Oxberger, but he just had these big time games. I mean, 2 hat-trick try performances coming in at 23.7 and 31 fantasy points. His floor was a little bit lower than Joe Mono and Nate Oxberger's, but nonetheless, I mean, I would say he's that first guy. Like Joe Mono and Nate Oxberger are in a tier of their own. I would put them in that same tier. And Lion Fudi comes up right behind this kind of secondary tier, where he has a little bit of a lower floor. You're starting to see a little bit more of the back 3 volatility, but man, he has that ability to have some big time games.
Yeah, it was wild to watch because at the start of the year, you thought Connor Mooneyham was going to be in that winger position. There was no way that he was going to lose it. And then you see Mooneyham's performance in the first 2 weeks, and he left a lot on the table and left a lot to be desired. And then you see in the 3rd week, Liana Futi come on for a half and absolutely explode with 12 points in 43 minutes.
Yeah.
After that, it was him, and Seattle Seawolves were going to be going with him, and they were not looking back. And he proved them right. He just continued to go on a tear. And honestly, he had to be one of the top waiver wire pickups in our league just by the way that he continued throughout the season. Because, if you look at the first 2 weeks, even if you drafted him, which he didn't get drafted.
He did. 14,
he
third
did.
round of the 14th round, but I believe he was dropped, though.
So exactly. So you look at the first 2 weeks and you're going, hey, he's, what is he doing? He's playing 20 minutes a game, getting under 2 points in the first 2 weeks. You're dropping him for another guy because you don't expect to see him get those picks. And you see that 3rd week. And after that, I mean, that was big for him. And he showed that he could do that all season, which he did.
Actually, who drafted him? I'm trying to look up who drafted Futi. It was Steven, the Feral Hippies, dried Liana Futi. I'm pretty sure he got dropped.
Yeah, I remember him moaning about dropping him and trying to get somebody to give him back and stuff like that.
But yeah, third pick of the 14th round. I mean, again, it kind of looked like he was kind of that flyer pick at the end, and if he'd just given that extra week to kind of go through, he would have given that back to you. But yeah, Lion of Foodie, I mean, electric. Again, kind of again, his stats, nothing is kind of necessarily like crazy off the board with him. 9 tries, 1,200 meters gained. Doesn't really do it on the tackle. I believe I was it 82 tackles that he had, 83 tackles. So he's adequate at
Yeah.
the defensive end. 2 hot trick try matches, like we said. 5 breakdown steals, which is nice. So yeah, Futi kind of comes in at that top of that second tier. All right, moving on to number 4. Talk about guys that kind of just somehow got their way up here. I mean, Caleb McEnany, nothing really special. And this number 4 spot, 194.3 fantasy points. And this is what the interesting conversation has. He had 5 tries, over 1,200 meters gained, 5 try assists, played that fullback position pretty consistently for the Utah Warriors. But I think it was his kicking game that allowed him to boost himself into this top 4 or this top 5. Without the kicking, I don't think he's necessarily there. He had 5 conversions, 3 penalties from this past year, which is obviously a big boost in points.
Yeah.
But I guess the question that lends itself here is it valuable? Do you still value Callum McEnany as high, or is it better to have those kicking points elsewhere? And having a guy that's a little bit of a lower ceiling floor type guy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
but so here's what I think. Like, he wasn't the Warriors' main kicker, right?
sure.
That was Joel Hodgson. So if you were picking him up, you weren't necessarily relying on him for kicking. In cases where you needed to, you knew that you had a guy on your roster that could provide you with that kicking support. If picked up a 10 that maybe he doesn't kick for his team, or picked up a 10 that maybe you can't really rely on to get as many points as the Utah Warriors, and you see that Joel Hodgson is out or something like that. I think it's nice to have there. But when I look at McNee's stats, to me, it still looks like a top 5 stat line, right? Like, put the kicking aside, he still had that consistency of double-digit points to where I could sit there and be like, he's a lock in my starting lineup. And I can expect the consistency of getting double-digit points from him. And I would love to, like, he would be a guy that I would completely trust to sit in there and just leave him in that starting lineup. So I still think, even though the kicking adds to it, he looks like a top 5 stat-wise guy to me. I was surprised to see that he's the only 15 or like kind of pure fullback that we've seen on this list, just because of how much like
Meterage.
meters they get on the counterattack and stuff like that. But I definitely think he had a big season this year, and I'm glad that he kind of made his way into the top 5.
He is where we start in this tier 2. Consistent floor, like you said, Matt, going to get you double-digit points. He's just not going to get you those Joe Mono.
I mean, you can only have so many
game.
guys on that team, right? Like, this is the 3rd Utah guy that we've seen when it comes to the center and the back 3. Like,
Sure.
Mika Kruse is a guy that's going to be explosive. Joe Mono is going to be a guy that's explosive. Right. You can't have an explosive guy throughout every team.
It's good.
And Caleb McEnany was the guy that kind of was I'm going to sit here, I'm going to be in this fullback position, and I will get you meters gained, and I will get it to you not at an explosive rate, but I'll get it to you on a consistent basis and be that guy that's going to get you 10 to 15 points every week if you need it.
Right. All right. Well, let's shift on to number 5 to wrap up our top list here. Our first New England Free Jack that we're seeing, Paula Bellicana, coming in at that 5 spot, 193.3 fantasy points. 12 tries on the season, over 1,000 meters gained on the year, 3 breakdown steals, started in 12 of 12 matches that he played in, was drafted in the 7th round of the 4th, with the 4th pick in that round. Bellicana was a guy that I think people were pretty happy with. I mean, he played on a solid offense. Again, was consistent for you. I think if he had started and played in a little bit more matches, he would have probably been bumped up to the 4 spot or maybe even the 3 spot. This guy was a guy that was getting you at least 15 points every single week. You're really happy with Bellicana. Like, I think in my eyes, I think I would have rather had Bellicana than, obviously based on my roster construction, it might have been a little bit questionable, but more than Caleb McEnany and even maybe more than Line of Futi. On just like that stretch that he went on through through round 7 and 17, where he didn't get anything lower than 14.6 points, was incredible. But only 2 performances where he scored less than 5 points.
Yeah, but also, availability is a real thing. Like,
sure,
you got Bellicana if he's out for 3 games and those 3 games are crucial for you, what do you do for those games? Like, who
Right.
do you have replacing? Are you okay with having those 2 weeks of not having your best back 3 guy in your squad and needing to replace him? But, that's something that's specific season to season. I don't remember whether that was due to injury or just simply due to rest. So yeah, I think the fact that he did what he did all year, like you said, Ryan, like he missed 2 games or missed 3 games, and he had consistently over 13 points throughout the year, right? Except 2 throwaway games. And we saw his part of that offense. Like he was there for crossfield kicks.
Yeah.
He was there to be there for tries and be that kind of guy that just found himself in the right position. And the New England Free Jacks relied on him to be their try scoring machine. And it's evident he's putting up 12 tries, 2 behind the guy who scores the top tries in the league, right? So, yeah, Balakena, I think it's crazy the fact that he only finished at 5, honestly.
Yeah, pretty nuts. Pretty nuts. All right, well, there's your final view of the top 5 on the board there. Yeah, Matt.
I mean, we'll get into what our top 5s were, because our top 5 predictions, Rye, were based on a lot of what we saw last year, right? I mean, it was all on what we saw last year. But like the fact that this top 5 is so different from what we picked and so different from last year, I think we're not looking at the volatility, Ryan, from week to week. Yes, there's the volatility from week to week from
sure.
But the fact that in the back 3, there is the chance that anybody could go off from year to year. Ed Fido could have a bad year. He goes number 1, he has a bad year, but then the guy who gets number 1 next year goes in the 9th round, first pick, right? Like,
good point.
I think this is another concept of that volatility that we're seeing, is that if you're a back 3 player, you've got the skill set, you got the ability to finish and be in the right positions. You have that year where you're available all year and you're part of an offense that is explosive, like the Utah Warriors, like the San Diego Legion, like the New England Free Jacks. You're going to get your shot. Like, you're going to have an opportunity to score a lot of points. And we need to, as fantasy managers, look for those guys rather than necessarily trusting the fact that, hey, they can do it again.
And I think that's why there's this big worry in terms of drafting some of these guys so early, because you're not as confident that those are the guys that are going to be the contributors. I mean,
let's go through our back 5. Like, let's go through our top 5, Ryan, and the viewers and listeners will see exactly, like, and we can say where these guys got drafted and be like, what happened?
Right. All right. Well, there's your last look at the top 5 there on your screens here. We're going to shift on over now to our predictions to start breaking this conversation down on kind of this volatility thing. So let's throw up our predictions heading in to the 2023 year. And Matt, like you said, a little bit rough here. We didn't get
we weren't
any
even close
of the top 5 guys in there. But I think there is some explaining to do on our end, and there's definitely some explaining to do on my end as well. I mean, we'll start off with the top here. Both you and I had Ed Fido as the number 1 guy heading into the season. I don't think exactly. Like, I mean, what we saw him do in the 2022 year and just the number of tries, he was the 2022 version of Joe Mono.
Yeah.
Right? Like, he just had all the try scoring ability. I believe he also scored around 14 tries in that year as well. Rugby New York was rolling. The New York Ironworkers were rolling in that 2022 year.
Not bad.
Ed Fido was the biggest benefactor of that. But I think a combination of factors went into here. I believe Ed Fido dealt with injury this year at some points. I'm almost certain. And then also just the New York Ironworkers were just not what we thought they were going to be. And he started off the year well. He just had games where he just kind of fell off the map and kind of disappeared, and that New York offense was just not the same. He finishes off as the 11th best back 3 player. But it's just not bad. But when you drafted him first overall, that's not what you want. That is definitely a loss there. Ed Fido, disappointing season to say.
Yeah, to me, I just think the New York Ironworkers went away from having him as their focal point of their offense. Like, when he was the focal point of their offense and they used him as he should, and that is to run people over and break gain line and break tackles, that's when you saw him get those double-digit points. That's when you saw him get the 18.9s, 18.2s, the 16.9 points, right? Like, that's what we wanted to see from him, and we just didn't end up getting that from him or the New York Ironworkers. Uh, and it's crazy to think the fact that he went number one pick, 1.1 in our draft, and that was the outcome that he ended up with fantasy wise. Yeah, it's none of us could have expected that.
Right. All right. Coming at number 2, Duncan Matthews. He was our kind of consensus number 2 guy. Finished off as the back 323.
He was at the top there for a while, right?
Yeah, he was. And I think to your credit, Matt, I think he was a guy that you also had on your squad as well.
Yeah,
He
I
had
did.
114 fantasy points to end the season. It was that meters gained you're relying on, and that's what you thought. I think the ideology going into that was that was going to be a much more consistent, reliable stat line that you could kind of count on each week than maybe counting on a try here and there. I mean, 21.6 fantasy points in round 1. Didn't have the meters gain in round 2, but then he comes back in round 3 and 4 with 153 and 182. I think the volatility is there, though. Like, I think that the meters gain is tough. And then again, he's also a guy that after round 9 was dealing with injury, kind of put him out of the mix.
Yeah, look, he was a guy that it was reliant on, if you're going to kick him the ball, watch out because he's going to put up some points.
Mhm.
And he was reliant on kind of the other team's tactics because that was where you saw these 155, 153, 182. It was Duncan Matthews deciding that I'm never going to kick the ball back to you. I'm only going to run it back. And that's how he got most of these points. Unfortunately for him, the big thing of the year is that like he got hurt in week 9 and we didn't see him until the last week of the season, I believe. So, yeah, I would be interesting to see how he would have done if he had a full year under his belt. I think he would have ended up in the top 5 for sure. He probably would have replaced McEnany, I think, in that top 5. But yeah, he just got played with injuries and was just a guy that relied a lot on meters gained, which made him, Ryan, like you said, very volatile as a back 3.
All right, coming in at number 3 in our predictions, we had Penny Lasaka there, which I think, last season it was an interesting one. I think he also had some, I believe, kicking responsibilities when we were creating these predictions.
It screwed
that
with
kind
us,
of skewed us a little bit. He had adequate performances, just never the explosive performances. I mean, he started with Ogor DC consistently, had stretches where he would get double-digit fantasy points. He just wasn't the guy there that was going to be getting you those tries on a week in and week out basis.
And look, you're not going to get top 5 You're not going to be a top 5 back 3 with the competition that they have by playing 10 games.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, it is what it is. I believe it was injury. I can't remember, but yeah, you're just not going to rack up enough fantasy points to compete with the likes of Paula Balakena to be in that top 5 spot when you only play 10 games.
And then this 4th spot is at least the toughest one for me. I don't know about you, Maddie, but for me, I picked JP Eloff. Obviously, this had to feed in a lot into my hype that I was buying into when it came to the Chicago Hounds squad. We know what happened with the Chicago Hounds squad. Not that great. JP Eloff had a good 2022 year. That's why there was so much excitement. I believe with the NOLA Gold, correct? Eloff was with the NOLA Gold, I want to say.
Yep.
In the season before, and he was so electric there. Comes over to the Chicago Hounds. Just never pans out at all. Doesn't consistently play or start for the Chicago Hounds. I think there's enough to be said there. Just a wrong pick here. I got to own up to it. Just JP Eloff was not it.
Hey, enough said. You said it yourself. I'm not going to beat you up any more than you should be beat up. But on my end, on number 4, I mean, go with that Drew Wild prediction. Honestly, I like Drew Wild. I thought he played really well throughout the year. He had, I think, 1 week with injury. But other than that, I mean, I was expecting the same Duncan Matthews effect, I think, out of Drew Wild. And I really thought that the meters gain going into the year would have a lot more of an impact. But we realized that, look, like having meters gain on the counterattack just isn't enough. Like you can't rely on that enough to be a top back 3. You have to be getting it consistently throughout the offense. And Drew Wild, he showed flashes of that at times. He was on a good Houston SaberCat side. And he had explosive performance. Well, not explosive, but he had good performances throughout the year. Just wasn't explosive enough to
It
be
just wasn't
a top back
supplemented
five.
with the tries, right? I
Yeah.
think we're starting to get a theme here that I
Well,
think to be in the top 5, you need to score at least 7 or 8 tries
even I
as a
mean,
back 3
even
player.
yeah, but even then, like he also didn't get the meters gain that you
That's
would
true.
expect. Like you need to see 90 plus in most weeks, and he was getting 40, 50 meters gained in
Right.
most weeks, right? Like you see the games where he gets 100 meters gain and like that's 11 points. And if you got 11 points every week, right, you're sitting pretty. But yeah, we just didn't see that type of explosion. He was my foreign pick or newcomer pick. Unfortunately, I probably could have went a different route.
Yeah, Drew Wild finishes off as the back 328. Again, JP Eloff finishes off as the back 339.
Yeah.
And then to round out our predictions, I'm actually not too mad about this one. I think for the fact that for the season that the New York Ironworkers had, I mean, Andrew Coe could have had a pretty good season. Andrew Coe, obviously friend of the show, coming in at back 3, number 9. Again, the talent is there. 168.8 fantasy points. He can get it done. He had the explosive games. He just was a victim of when the New York team had those dud games and they just didn't
Yeah.
score. I believe New York was involved in the lowest scoring game in the history of the MLR. Wasn't that the one that happened this past year?
Yeah. It was
He
one, yeah.
just didn't do it again. Injury kind of hurt him in round 5 when he was in there for like the first minute of the match, and then he got out with, I forget what injury it was.
It was a concussion.
I think something along the lines of that. But again, Coe had the talent there. Just again, being part of this New York Ironworkers squad that had a lot of promise heading into the year just never panned out, and you weren't going to be able to keep up with the likes of explosive New England Free Jacks teams, Utah Warriors teams, San
Yeah.
Diego Legion teams that were scoring points. The Ironworkers were not doing that.
I'll be interested to see next year, Rye. Is the volatility that he has in this last season, is that due to the Ironworkers? Or once the Ironworkers get better, are we going to see consistent explosive performances from him? Right?
Yeah,
Like
that'll be interesting.
that's what we have expected and seen from him in the past. He definitely has that explosive ability to be able to go off, right? Like we've seen that he's got that last year, even with the Ironworks of like 4 20-point games. So I'll be interested to see. I think he has a big year next year. And I wouldn't be surprised if you end up putting him back in your top 5 again.
Yeah. Yeah. And then for you, Matt, to round out your top 5 prediction, Mitch Wilson comes in as the back 326.
Oh, well, you know, what can I do? The guy got knocked out. So, you know, like there's only so much he got like
Yeah.
properly knocked out. And he missed, I forget how many games, but he missed a few games with injury.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was hard not to go with him. I think he had such a good year in the previous year. It's just difficult. And also the other thing is like, you saw Reese McDonald come onto the scene. You saw Paula Balakena be there. It's tough to get kind of a piece of that offense. There are so many guys that were able to explode on that team. And to be honest, the New England Free Jacks play didn't always lend to those huge performances from back 3 guys not named Paula Balakena.
Right. No. Yeah, no question about that. I mean, there are a few things that are through this exercise and through looking at these rankings. I think
Well, I know one thing, right?
there's a couple things that
Yeah. You go first.
First, I think the
suck.
volatility involved, right, is not so much about all the back 3 players, right? I think there's an inherent volatility around a lot of back 3 players, but where the volatility lands is what you were kind of mentioning earlier, Matt, is identifying who the top back 3 players are going to be, because it's such a change from a weekend or a year-to-year basis, and finding out what offenses are going to be, as explosive as they are, and finding not only the offense that are going to be explosive, but the guys that are going to be within those offenses that are going to be, because again, you would have said that Duncan Matthews would have been the explosive guy in that Seattle offense, but ends up being Lion Afuti. You know what I mean? You think that a certain guy is going to be that guy, but ends up being a different benefactor. That's the one thing. And then I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see how people approach that moving forward, and whether or not you go safer position. And it'll be interesting to see where Joe Mono
we'll obviously have more kind of draft analysis, or like, plans for the draft and how we're going to go about it. But a sneak preview is like, looking at this, what I've learned is that I'm not wasting a first or second round pick on a back three.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you have first pick 1 to 5, yeah, maybe you take a flyer on a guy that not a flyer. I mean, you take a shot on a guy who should be drafted in the top 5, a guy like Joe Mano, a guy like Nick Oxberger, but like it's tough. I mean, it's tough for me to look at this and be like, yeah, Ed Fido was a great pick. I mean, what else were you going to do? But like there were other guys on the board that ended up in a higher spot or like in a more consistent spot than Ed Fido, where you could have spent draft capital and probably could have felt a little safer with it.
Like,
so I'm just having like, it's tough with this back three position. I think this one, honestly, you look at it, it's one of the hardest ones to draft.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, you look at even like Vandy's pick and that 5th pick with Leroux Milan, right? Like even with the volatility of him being injured to start the season, he ended up being a way more consistent piece than any of the guys at the top. You know what I mean? Again, I think there's going to be a lot more clarity heading into this next draft, and I think just people have an understanding about kind of the positional makeup and kind of what is safe and what is not. So it's going to be interesting. I think after going through these rankings and all these players, it's going to be more clear on how teams should approach it.
Yeah.
So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how it is.
I don't think there wasn't any other position, right, that had the type of like, we sucked at this, right? We did. We were pretty bad. I think we ended up you winning by being 1-6 and 0-6. Okay, great. Congratulations. Good for you, Ryan. I was 0-6 or 7 and I 0-1-6 and I lost. We sucked, right? But despite that, we always got 1 to 3, 1 to 4 guys right in the top 5s. The back three position, we got 0.
Yeah.
Like we weren't even close, Ryan. Our closest one was your Andrew Coe pick of back 3 9.
Yeah.
And that's far away from 5.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
it's
like
good. Yeah, no, it's good maths.
Like that was good math.
I mean, again,
but it's just like that just should show the fact that, hey, back 3 is an anxious position when it comes to fantasy rugby, because one guy who's the star last year, we can end up seeing Joe Mano being non-existent in the following year and another guy taking that spot. So I'm heading into this draft like, what am I doing at this back 3 position? Because if I can get a guy like Joe Mano in the 9th round and take a flyer and take a high risk, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what it basically means is that if you have a top 3 or 4 pick heading into next year, that's going to be a tough decision. It's going to be a very tough decision.
How do you not pick Joe Mano? How do you not?
Right. Do you take Joe Mano because of what he was able to do last year, or do you go with the JP Duplessis? You know what I mean? Like, or do you go a guy that a Leroux Milan if he gets back healthy and good to go? You know what I mean? Like, it's going to be a very, very hard decision because you're going to have that 250 fantasy points staring you in the face.
Ryan, I think we just want the draft to come, man.
It's true.
Happening. We're getting excited.
I mean, the months are coming down. Again, we'll continue the draft breakdowns as we continue to go through. But hey, that wraps it up for the top fantasy player ranking reveal from 2023. And it almost feels good, Matt, because now it's all about looking towards 2024, man. Now it's all about looking ahead and trying to figure out kind of who are going to be these next step guys. But again, I think this just encapsulates how exciting and interesting of a 2023 fantasy year it was for everyone and finding these players. And it should be interesting how 2024 pans out. Just got to count down the months here till the next fantasy MLR season.
Ain't that right? And forget about these past few months where we've had to go over these predictions and realize that we stink at them. So.
But all right, well, again, we're going to continue here on the Fantasy Ruckers Show to break down the latest news and notes. Again, there's going to be so much of these roster moves, like we mentioned, that are coming down. We'll hopefully be able to bring you additional interviews with some of the players from around the league and to continue our preparation for the 2024 year. And again, stay in the know for when we are able to open this up to the masses and have everyone try out a little bit of fantasy MLR. It's going to be an exciting time here around the world of North American rugby. Anything else you got to say, Matt, to wrap up the show?
Nope. I think I'm good. All I got to say is that wish Vandy was here.
There you go. All right. Well, for Matt Yee, for myself, the Fantasy Ruckers Show will be back with more great Fantasy MLR content.
We stink.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.